Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network recap for the fights tonight, where in the main event, Gervonta Davis absolutely leveled Frank Martin with a right hook, left cross combo in the eighth. Man, if only that's what we were talking about tonight.
Oh.
No, this is the Sherdog Radio Network recap for UFC on ESPN 58. Perez versus Taira, also known as UFC Vegas 93. I'm your host for tonight, Ben Duffy. Keith Schillen is indisposed tonight. He's got some stuff going on, so I am joined by the man, Adam, longtime listener, several-time co-host. Adam, how you doing tonight?
We both know Keith just did not want to sit through this card and talk about it with you for 3 hours. I mean, we're both on the East Coast, so we both have to stay up till like 3 a.m. to do this. And so I completely understand throwing this one off to me.
I just going to say Keith chose very wisely which card to miss, because I know he's going to be out of town for the UFC 303 preview, and he's going to do it from the road nonetheless. So he is capable of mobile work, but this one wasn't worth it. What melted away into an 11-fight card tonight, had been 13 fights a week ago, was headlined by a high-stakes flyweight matchup between perennial contender, now resurgent contender, Alex Perez, and the undefeated phenom Tatsuro Taira. A very intriguing fight. Seemed to be, we'll talk about that in a minute. What had been shaping up to be a very intriguing fight ended unceremoniously about halfway through the second round, where Taira finished a standing back take to takedown combo, and Perez's knee snapped. Like, we don't have any word yet. We don't know if it was a ligament, we don't know exactly what happened, but he went down screaming in pain immediately. Herb Dean moves in for the stoppage. For the second week in a row, we have a UFC main event ending in a way that nobody would have drawn up or wanted, but it's what we get. Okay, obviously nobody, not even Tatsuro Taira, would have wanted the fight to end this way. Obviously, he wanted to win. Yeah. He wanted to pass the test. He wanted to be able to make a reasonable call out of the champ, even if that's not what's next for him. But he wouldn't have drawn it up like this, because now the questions abound.
Yep.
How did you see the fight at the time it ended? Did you think Perez was winning? Did you think it was even? Did you think Taira was winning?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I'd love to see the scorecards come out because I'd be very curious about this. But I had Perez slightly edging out the first round, and I don't think that was the popular choice, just based on like tweets and based on some of the commentary and stuff like that. But what I noticed a lot was that when Taira in the first round stuck to, he got Perez in that tie clinch a bunch, really tried to pull him into it, landed good shots from there. But and I think those are the more obvious shots and the more visible ones, I guess, in the eyes of the judges. But on the way in, I saw him getting tagged quite a bit by Perez. But honestly, I think he held his own well. That might not be the hardest he's ever been hit, but Perez definitely does clock pretty well. So between that and then the takedown at the end of the round, I thought that Perez maybe had slightly edged the first round. So I was very curious going into the next ones to see what would happen. And just to get on that, unless you have something to say.
Well, Marcus Mustard gave us the word here, and Marcus Mustard has become the unofficial, unpaid intern producer of the Schillen and Duffy show, just bringing the facts. No joke, I appreciate it. Looks like all the official cage size judges gave it to Perez round one. The 3 Sherdog virtual scores, of which I was one, gave Perez round one. And I agree with you. It was a razor close round. Neither guy really took control of the round, but Perez clearly was trying to make it sloppy and messy.
Yeah,
he's fighting a younger, faster guy with better reach. He didn't want to just get either stuck on the outside and jabbed up for a round, or just dive straight into Taira's world on the mat. He wanted to make it sloppy. Like, if they hit the ground, I think he wanted it to be off a big slam or a weird scramble where Taira couldn't just go to work. And I thought he succeeded in that. I very narrowly gave him the round. Now, what were you going to say about the second round? It sounded
so glad to know that we all kind of agree on the first round. Glad it wasn't crazy there or anything. But the second round is really when it started shaping up to be a fight between these two, and just showing some of Taira's game. He lands that takedown in the second round, and instantly so they scramble up, but he takes the back, and the back take from Taira and the things he did from it. And I thought of this first, so I'll take credit, but then John Gooden says something about it. But the way he's sort of spiraling off of Perez's back from there to like sort of readjust his angle of approach. Looked super great, and it was really interesting to see how Taira's grappling would match up against such a highly ranked opponent, such a jump up in competition. And I mean, he was doing great. And the thing about the finishing sequence, if you will, is that the throw was good, and the the position they ended up in, but despite like setting aside the knee getting blown out and the pain from Perez, I think that still would have happened. That still would have been a really good position for Taira, and we would have seen some really interesting action there. But yeah, I mean, Taira in this post-fight interview said that it was intentional and that blowing out people's knees is a secret technique he knows, which wouldn't put it past him. Maybe he knows some sort of ninjutsu sort of thing over there in Okinawa. But yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate because I think that was really starting to shape up into seeing who was the better fighter. But Taira was looking good. Taira was looking good.
I agree. And part of what I led off with about how this kind of finish isn't what anybody would have wanted, I feel the same that the 30C West said. It was close, but Perez seemed to be getting more and more desperate while Taira was adjusting. And we had several fights tonight where the less technical fighter or less athletic or smaller fighter tried to make an equalizer out of making the fight sloppy, chaotic, either a brawl or a scramble fest. And they succeeded to, various degrees. But I agree that Taira was adjusting. And what this robs Taira of, assuming he went on to win.
Yeah.
He could have checked off all the boxes you would have wanted him to check off before he got a title shot. Ability to maintain a work rate in a 5-round fight, ability to basically fight off adversity, maintain composure against a dangerous veteran opponent. And all that got kind of cut off after 8 minutes of action. It was still impressive because we saw what he was on his way to, but Perez is the kind of fighter that you would not have been able to count out of that fight until either the final horn or until a finish. And so I would love to have seen Taira have to thread that needle for a couple more rounds because Perez, even desperately behind, he's one of the hardest hitting guys in that division. And he's a very dangerous grappler in his own right. So we're a little shortchanged. The question here was who was going to take the step up? Was Perez going to continue this impressive resurgence where he seemed to be on his way down and maybe out, and then he knocked out Matheus Nicolau 6 weeks ago? I think he may have been the first UFC fighter to get 3 fights in 2024. If he got back-to-back wins over Nicolau and Taira, all of a sudden he's back in the top 4, top 5, and is able to call for a title shot. Were we going to see that, or were we going to see Taira take the final transformation from prospect to contender? In your mind, did Taira do enough that he's realistically in the title picture? He called Pantoja's name in the post-fight interview, but I mean, you expect him to do that. You shoot your shot,
right?
You ask out Miley Cyrus on a date, you ask Dana for 50 G's, you call out the champ.
The Miley Cyrus thing worked for one guy, so
and it didn't even work. Like she sent him a polite, and then she was like, "Oh, what is his podcast?" And she said, "Never mind." Anyway,
what's the guy's name? I just know his nickname is the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Julian Marquez.
Thank you.
Co-host with Kendra Lust of the Anyway,
talking about Taira. It's one of those really interesting things where I totally agree with you there that, I was seeing this shape up similarly to how you and Keith saw it, definitely facing some adversity, which he did, starting to take over in the later rounds, maybe, getting a sub later, maybe just writing it out to the judges. But what this does, this ending it's the same result as what we thought it would be, but it changes a whole lot. I mean, even when it happened, I instantly had to change around a little of my matchmaking for this fight for both, the winner and the loser. And what I think it really does is, and I'll get to the title picture part, but, when we look at Taira in terms of the landscape of the 125 division, his biggest comparison point is Makayev, both undefeated, both have fought 6 times in the UFC now, and, against varying levels of opponents, varying levels of performance. And what this would have done is, this fight would have given Taira the edge over Makayev in the sense that this is a main event, which Makayev has not had. He could have gone into those championship rounds and shown us something that could set him apart for at least from that crowd. And if not, other top contenders. And so while he does win here, And even if he won like the way in a normal way, I guess I can say I don't think that would have instantly ramped him up to the title picture. I do think this should put him in like the top 6 or 7, based on last time I checked the rankings. But I definitely think he's one good win away from a title shot, and it'll depend how a lot of other fights go in the division, and it'll depend on who he fights next to get there. But yeah, personally, Taira is my favorite fighter at 125, and so I'm excited to see what he does next.
Speaking of, whom should he fight next? He called out the champ. That's probably not realistic at this point, but what would you do with the guy? He's 24 years old. He seems able to fight as often as the UFC wants to call him up. What do you do with the guy?
Yeah, so this is interesting. In my way of expecting this to go, be like a pretty impressive, drawn out performance from Taira. And this is probably still the answer, but it adds a few different wrinkles with the way it ended. I'm looking at the number 1 and number 2 spots in the rankings, the two Brandons of the division who, have, just fought each other, just both lost to Pantoja. And it just kind of, makes me think that it's time to shuffle up the bottom half of the top 6-5 with the top half of it. And, I think I want to see Moreno versus Taira. Might be crazy, but
I don't hate that. I was looking at the Brandons myself just because my thought was, give me a top 10, top 5 or 6 contender who is not in line to fight Pantoja anytime soon. And there are plenty of those guys because Pantoja has fought everybody.
Yeah,
it's almost a waste that on July 27th, Manel Kape and Muhammad Mokaev, two of the hottest guys that haven't fought Pantoja yet, are fighting each other. Why make those guys knock each other off? I like either Royval or Moreno. Honestly, if Perez won, I was going to say give us Perez versus Moreno because they were supposed to fight each other a couple of years ago. It never happened, and they're almost the only two guys from that class of 2017 in the UFC flyweight division that haven't fought each other yet. Yeah. I mean, for Perez, I almost feel bad trying to matchmake the guy right now.
Yeah.
With at his age, because I mean, the guy has a lot of tread off the tires. He's an old 33 or 34. You don't know until we know what's wrong with him. I mean, he might be on the shelf for the rest of the year, which would make it silly to try to matchmake him. But either of the Brandons, I like that for Taira. If you wanted to break up the Mokaev Kape fight and have, Taira fight one of those guys, I don't hate that either. I think Taira and Mokaev are gonna end up fighting at some point.
Yeah.
In fact, they strike me as the kind of prospects where they'll probably fight each other 3 times and at least 2 of them will be for a title.
Yeah, like, they're probably going to be the next Brandon and Figgy kind of thing in the next 2 years.
Well, and almost more than Brandon and Figgy, because Brandon and Figgy they weren't there at the top until they were there at the top. To me, it's more like, and this is a few years back, when Chris Weidman and Luke Rockhold entered the middleweight division around the same time. And like Rockhold was like 7-0 and Rockhold was like 9-1, but you could tell already, okay, these two guys are the future of the division after Anderson Silva's done. And they ended up being, at least for a while. We're going to see Mokaev and Taira at some point. Some people on the preview comment section were just raking Keith and me over the coals for saying that of the two of them, we think Mokaev had the higher upside ultimately. Like, if they fought right now, I think Taira would win. But if one of these guys became, I think Taira would win if they fought right now. But if one of these guys puts together a truly epic title reign 5 years down the road, like say get 6 or 7 defenses in a row and has like Demetrius Johnson looking over his shoulder, I think it's more likely Mokaev. But that's all pie in the sky. We've talked for a lot about, a 7 or 8 minute fight. Other general thoughts about this one?
No, not really. I mean, like you said, you can't really matchmake Perez right now. I mean, I had him on a loss penciled in for Steve Erceg, but I'll toss that out of the window for now. I mean, just to wrap it up, I mean, I think 125 is actually looking really cool right now. I think that the way, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but the way that Steve Erceg performed against Pantoja just really, threw the whole thing into whack, because he's only ranked number 9, Erceg. But he put on a better performance than either of the Brandons did against Pantoja. And so there's a lot of exciting things going on. Yeah, and to your point earlier, it is interesting that they're having Kape and Mokaev fight each other. I know there's a little bit of tension there, but at the same time, the UFC has already shown that they're not above putting guys not in the top 5 against their champion at that weight division. So yeah, I mean, I can't wait to see how it turns out. And yeah, I mean, with this fight too, it's, you know, one of those things where it ending early obviously robbed us of the most interesting fight on the card. But also, you know, after such
You
a slog.
mispronounced the interesting fight on the card, but we'll get
Yeah.
to that later.
Yeah. And but also it got us out of here 20 minutes earlier. So
That's true.
I
That's true. Uh,
yeah.
the co-main event, after multiple reshufflings, ended up being Miles Johns versus Douglas Silva de Andrade in a bantamweight matchup. It ended up in a unanimous decision in favor of Johns. This fight felt to me like it like smoldered and it smoked, but it never really burst into flame. Like it seemed like at any moment we
Yeah.
might actually get just this insane knockout. Like it was a tense fight.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't exciting in the sense that I'll probably ever go back and watch it until I need to watch tape on one of these guys again. Like it doesn't have that kind of entertainment value once you know that no finish came. But in the moment, I was actually like gripping my chair because it just felt like at any moment, one of those punches for Johns or one of de Andrade's flying knees or spinning wheel kicks was just gonna flatline the other guy. It never got there. And it was interesting to hear Johns afterwards because I expected him to be like frustrated on the mic and say, I should have got the finish. But you would have thought that he just won the Super Bowl. Like, this is the real Miles Johns. I've got a lion inside. I'm like, I mean, it's a good win for him. It really is. But I was surprised at that because this was a fight for me in which Miles Johns reverted to a lot of his worst habits. I mean, I know this goes back a long ways for someone your age, but Miles Johns to me feels like a 2005 wrestle boxer transported in time up to 2024. Like he's a good wrestler, and so many, especially in the early first half of the 2000s, so many especially stocky, burly wrestlers, once they realize that, all this training and all this core strength I've got gives me an incredibly powerful right hand or left hand if they're southpaw. And I made this comparison on the preview. It's like when Happy Gilmore hits the hole in one on the par 4, and he's like, well, I should just do that every time. That's a lot easier than learning to putt. And so many wrestlers, they'd get strikeritis. They'd fall in love with their striking. They'd stop wrestling, and a lot of them would lose sight of the fact that the threat of the takedown is what made their overhand effective. Because when you feint a level change, the guy's hands go to his waist. All of a sudden, he's wide open for the overhand. It's how Kevin Randleman knocked out Crow Cop. So yeah, this where Johns he was doing a lot of feinting, but he's just throwing one strike at a time and just going for the kill shot. Yeah, he's a guy who he's capable of throwing a jab. He's capable of throwing in combination. He's capable of shooting for a takedown early to establish that he can, and then using feints and level changes to keep his opponent off balance for the rest of the fight. But instead, this just seemed like two guys in a very slow race to find the knockout. I mean, tell me if you feel differently about this one.
No, I agree with you there. I mean, both these guys, especially
bantamweight Yoel Romero. If I can give out my listener of the night already,
right there,
that's a dagger right there. Yoel Romero, where the comparison of his highlight reel to the actual experience of watching any one of his fights is one of the biggest disparities in MMA history, where his fights are just death until or unless he gets the finish. Love it. Linden Guo, thank you.
No, I totally get there. And then I like Kyle Ahi, putting up that I'm pretty sure he's talking about Andrade because that makes the most sense. But Buff Gollum. That's what I said. And when he walked out, man, when Andrade worked out, I even wrote it down in my notes, but he was walking out, he's bald, he looks like a juiced up fucking Michael or Walter White, and he's coming into Brazilian Celine Dion, and then he comes in there, and the whole fight super tense. I mean, to me it looked like two brand new players in UFC 4, and one of them only knows how to hold R2 and throw an overhand right. The other one just looked at the combos list and trying to mash as many buttons as they can to throw spinning back kicks, and neither of them actually, connected well with any of theirs. And it was tense. But it was boring. And I had it. I actually gave it to Andrade slightly, although I'm not at all miffed about it going to Johns. But yeah, just It was a fight. It was a fight.
Yeah, of all the thousands of fights the UFC has put on, that is definitely one of them.
That is definitely one of them.
Any other like general thoughts about that one, or should we move on?
No more one-liners or quips about that one.
All right. Well, speaking of one-liners and quips, two of the greatest cliches in combat sports history, but definitely in MMA history, are speed kills and power is the great equalizer. And both of those arguable facts were on display in the feature fight of the night as Lucas Almeida took on Timothy Kwamba. In the first 15 seconds of the fight, I was like, oh, Kwamba is going to destroy this guy. The difference in speed on the feet was so ridiculous. Like Kwamba was just dancing into range, popping him with a jab or a 1-2, bouncing out before Almeida reacted at all. Like Almeida had his hands up as though to defend himself, and Kwamba was bouncing in, putting a glove right between his guard and bouncing back out. And then 45 seconds in, Almeida just calmly plunked him with a right hand, like a glancing left and then a clean right that just sat Kwamba down. And that was literally it. Kwamba,
the fight.
to his credit, Kwamba was never really shook. Like after getting knocked down, he was on his bike for 10 or 15 seconds to clear the cobwebs, but then he went right back to work and he was doing all the right things. He was like bouncing into range. He was landing volume. He went to work on the body. He thought, this is a big dude. He's a big dude that's all torso, and he probably had a big weight cut. Let me start hammering his liver, doing all the right things. Like, so speed kills, but then Almeida just about 4 or 5 times in the fight plunked him with the exact same right hand. And I mean, he only got credited with 1 official knockdown, but I counted 2 knockdowns in the first round and 1 borderline one in the second. Kwamba could not get out of the way of that thing. It's a performance that doesn't leave me higher on either guy, but I definitely feel as though Kwamba is better than his UFC record looked. Because right now he's 0-2 in the UFC. He had his first fight was that short notice thing against Balaji Oki, who looked 3 weight classes bigger than him. And again, it was on short notice. So I give him a mulligan on that one. And then here against Almeida, he lost a straightforward decision, but again, he showed some UFC level tools. He's got great speed. He caught Almeida cleanly a ton of times. Just he didn't have the power to do much with it.
Yes, exactly.
I don't know what he needs to add to his tool chest to turn that one outstanding trait into an actual competitive skill set, but he's got time to work on it. He's yet another product of the Hawaii to Las Vegas pipeline that's kind of appeared in the last 5 years or so. So he's had a great camp. Since he's a Hawaiian, I'm going to guess he's probably a better wrestler than he shows in his fights. So maybe he can just turn that around. 145 is a division where you literally have to win 6 or 7 fights in a row to
sniff the rankings,
to break into the top 10. Do you have that kind of feel about either of these guys, or is this just 2 more dudes at 145?
Yeah, I will agree with what you say about Kwamba, because he won that third round, and he won that third round pretty convincingly. And coming back from all those hits he was taking from Almeida, definitely showed that. Yeah, well, he has a lot of things to maybe work on. I agree with what you said, that like he was connecting clean on Almeida, but Almeida walked through every single one of the clean shots he took. I think he does have some upside. I think I think maybe this is just because Kwamba is the younger fighter, the newer fighter, and he's kind of had a weird career so far in the UFC, like you said. But I think he has maybe more upside than Almeida. Almeida still is coming off before this that knockout loss to Andre Fili, which is not a knock on him at all.
And then before that, he got completely wrestle fucked by Pat Sabatini. So we've seen what it looks like when he takes on top 10, top 15 guys.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right. And Almeida is 33. 33 isn't ancient at 145, but if he's already looking pretty slow, that's not going to get better after 33.
Yeah.
So, LGP 8771. Yeah. At the end of the fight, it's like, hey, Mom, can we get Holloway versus Gaethje? No, we have Holloway versus Gaethje at home.
Johns.
Like where they're trying to swing down in the middle of the cage at the end of it. Oh, my goodness. I'm
Man, that was
inclined
funny.
to move past these. I mean, this is going to be a pretty quick recap, just because, as somebody in the Sherdog editorial Slack commented as we were, at work tonight, this really is just kind of a souped up contender series card. Like, most of the
Yeah.
fighters on this card came through the contender series, and that includes several of these fighters lost on the contender series and got signed
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
literally might as well be a contender series card, if the contender series is not even doing its job of separating who is worthy to go to the UFC versus who isn't. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
uh,
I think you might have mentioned this on the preview, or maybe Keith did at one point, but you joked about how Dana White's Contender Series just feels like Tuesday prelims, and some of these fight night cards feel like Saturday night Dana White's Contender Series sometimes.
yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'm cool to move on. I got a few quips lined up for some fights, but not these ones.
All right. Well, I mean, for me, the obvious fight of the night was before this, as Brady
Ooh,
Hiestand took on
yeah,
Garrett Armfield in a bantamweight scrap, and this one was a whole hell of a lot of fun. The
yeah,
story of this entire card was that, I mean, was there even a single knockout on the card? No. It's like, this card
nope,
was 20% awesome groundwork and 80% like cardio kickboxing / Taibo, as we had just plenty of kind of low powered, high volume exchanges on the feet, but then several fights were awesome on the ground. This one was
yeah,
definitely one of them.
yeah,
I thought this thing was going to be over, you know,
so many times,
so many times.
so many
Both
times.
guys, each guy had the other in serious trouble
Yeah,
at least once. Uh, this one, it ended, Heastan got the finish in the third round. And he got the finish with the exact same kind of rear naked choke setup that Armfield had pretty easily fought his way out of twice before. Like, where it's not just the traditional rear naked choke. It's like the bar arm choke where his forearm is parallel to the windpipe. So it's like
mhm,
pain and strangulation. And Armfield not only doesn't panic, but just kind of effortlessly peels the hands off and goes back to work. It was that exact same kind of setup, and just third time or fourth time or whatever it was the charm.
yeah, yeah,
It's Brady Hiestand is now 3-1 in the UFC. His only loss was in the TUF 29 finale, where he lost that really fun fight to Ricky Tercios.
mhm,
Dude, Ricky Tercios is my guy. I see him
yeah,
every Wednesday night at the gym. I love him, but if Hiestand and Tercios fought again, I'm favoring Hiestand pretty heavily, because, again, Tercios is a guy that thrives on turning his fights into chaos.
yep,
You threw out one of my all-time favorite one-liners about that, where Ricky Tercios fights like a stunt man. Hiestand is not susceptible to losing that kind of fight anymore, because Armfield just did that to him at a much higher level,
yeah,
like just creating scrambles on the ground, trying to overwhelm him with pace, just confuse him. And Hiestand was more than equal to the test. Like, this is this was a low stakes card,
yeah,
but Hiestand, he's still only 25 years old. If he can get past the injury problems that have kind of turned him into a once a year fighter since
mhm,
2019,
mhm.
sneaky, low key, he may be the guy most likely to fight for a title on this card outside of the headliner.
Yeah, yeah, no,
And
I
I'm
agree
saying
with you
that
there.
in maybe the hardest division in the UFC to get a title shot right now.
True.
Like,
Yeah, and it's still the outer chance. I mean,
it's
but
still
yes,
the other
but
chance.
when you say the entire card besides the main event, I agree with you there. Yeah, I mean, this fight really kind of revived me after chugging through the prelims and through the Amabayev fight, but super exciting. I mean, just I mean, probably one sub attempt each per guy in each round, and um yeah, I mean, we might talk about it later at the end, but I think these guys deserve something for that, because that was, um, yeah, that was the kind of that was the highlight of the night, in my opinion, because of how the main event went.
Yeah. Having said that, Hiestand would have some work to do. Uh, Even leaving aside all the groundwork, which, Hiestand held his own really well against a great ground fighter in Armfield. He still got tagged up a lot on the feet too.
Yeah,
For whatever time this fight spent on the feet, Armfield was definitely getting the better of it.
hmm,
So he'd have some work to do, but as young as he is and as impressive as he is, considering that, I mean, outside of like Sean O'Malley at the very top, the way up at 135 is a minefield of good wrestlers and grapplers. He's well equipped to deal with a lot of those guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And I think
yeah,
that, at the end of that, um, he kept up a pretty good pace for all that grappling. And I know it's 135. They all have pretty good gas tanks, but for as high pace of a fight it was, both guys came out of it, fairly well conditioned, if not one of them being slightly unconscious. But that's
yeah.
another thing. That's another thing for he stand. Just that, yeah, he seems to have a lot of tools that could benefit him going up the rankings at bantamweight. But yeah, definitely have to watch for that, head movement because he was getting clocked.
Mhm. Before that, flyweight fight, Asu Almabaya versus Jose Johnson. I said it on the preview. I maintain this on the recap. Whoever convinced Jose Johnson that he needed to drop to 125 pounds is a war criminal. Well, I mean, not only is it shocking,
Yeah.
like how tall and thin he is, none of the problems that he had at 135 were solved by moving down. Like he has uncoachable height and reach at 125. Like I think the UFC booth talked about Almabayev's difficulty finding sparring partners to simulate him.
Mhm.
Sure, but you know what? It took Almabayev about 2 minutes to get past that. Like
Yep.
obviously the
Yep.
jab and the front kicks, Almabayev was having trouble looking for a way in, but about 2 minutes in, he figured it out, and after that, it was a washing on the floor. After that, he
Yeah.
took him down in all 3 rounds. I didn't keep track of top position stats, but it felt like in a 15-minute fight, he racked up about 8 minutes of top control. And he had Johnson in peril multiple times. Like, took the back, was working for chokes, was pelting him with ground strikes, like not a ton, but like accurate ground strikes that do pile up. The only thing that kept this from being a complete rout is that Johnson had a couple of moments of offense on the ground as well, where,
Mhm.
he took
Mhm.
Almabayev's back, got the body triangle, was working for the choke. Uh, Asu Almabayev has now won, I believe, 16 straight fights since his only 2 career losses, one of which was to Tagir Ulanbekov, but they were literally 7 years ago. He just turned 30.
Yeah.
He hasn't lost a fight since he was 23 years old. He's won 16 in a row. Is this guy a future title contender at 125? Like, okay, yeah, hard, yes or no, buy or sell. Does he fight for a UFC title at some point?
No.
Okay.
That's just
Uh,
gut reaction. Gut reaction,
all
no
right.
thought. No. Just
Okay.
because statistically the odds are on my side, but I'd have to get back to you on that for real. But yeah, I mean, great performance from Almabayev. And yeah, I agree with you what you're saying about the Johnson moving down to 125. It's like he wasn't a super short bantamweight or a super small
He
bantamweight,
was one
but
of the tallest bantamweights in
yeah,
the UFC. Like
unless
this
he
was
was
not necessary.
yeah, unless he was just trying to avoid like O'Malley, who may be like an inch taller than him, then this really wasn't necessary. And it reminds me of these fucking videos I would watch as a kid of like Black Widow versus Hornet and stuff like that, where you see like a big spider with long spindly legs, like keep like a big buzzy hornet on the sides for a second until the hornet jumps in, just crumples it in a ball and kills it. But also I have a story to say about Almabayev. I figure since Keith isn't here, like, I should take over. It's story time with Adam now.
All right.
And as I'm officially the Sherdog's anti-doping agent, going around
Yep.
to these fighters, making sure that they're, don't have anything finicky in their medicine cabinet. So this whole week I've been going around the entire world. I went to Japan for Taira, went to Kazakhstan, ended up in Rhode Island for looking through Keith's medicine cabinet. And which I promised him I wouldn't say what was in it, so I can't divulge anything there. But you're never gonna believe this. I was in Kazakhstan going through Almabayev stuff, trying to see if he was doping or anything, like, because you always have to be curious about these, middle European, sort of West Asian kind of fighters. And I see Almabayev in bed with Zhalgas Zhumagulov's second wife. Swear to God.
Oh,
Swear to God.
so
Swear to
the
God.
pretty one.
Trouble in
So,
paradise, I guess. I think he
so
left the
the only thing
UFC.
in his medicine cabinet was Viagra, apparently. And
Yes, yes.
but by the way, whatever you found in Keith's medicine cabinet was planted there by a cop. So
It literally was. It literally
yes.
was. But besides that, Almabayev, I mean, he is a great fighter. Honestly, I think that the Tagir Ulanbekov loss in his back pocket, like, so many years ago, is a really interesting idea now, as they both go up the rankings. You know, as right after you asked me that question, I've been mulling it over in the back of my head if I think he'll fight for a title. It's hard to say. He's kind of in the same spot that Taira and Mokaev were in 3 fights ago. I think he'll crack the top 5. I think he will. If he keeps on this trajectory, I think he'll crack the top 5, maybe the top 7. Hard to say if he'll fight for the title right now.
Well, and I mean, it's perfectly valid to say that he is a championship level talent, but I'm still betting against it just because there's too much chaos in this sport. You have to string together too many wins in a row. You need to be lucky and healthy as well as good. Yeah, I have no problem with that at all. It's not like you're saying Almabayev is bad or he's overrated. It's just it's tough to string together enough wins to get to a title shot in the UFC, especially in the divisions 135 through 170, but really all but 2 or 3 divisions. It's just hard to do. Like there have been plenty of people who've been good enough and just not lucky enough. Last comments on this, Almabayev, and I'm not trying to be culturally insensitive here. My cultural insensitivity is effortless and natural. But
hey, I just said that he was sleeping with another Kazakhstan fighter's wife. So
of the notable CIS headwear in the UFC, his is the worst because you got Khabib Nurmagomedov with the original papaja. That's just the cute fuzzy
Classic
thing that became a major piece of MMA merch for years. Now the obvious king is Shavkat Rakhmonov, who wears the Ushanka, and his Ushanka is 75% of an adult Timberwolf, like on top of his head. Like I fear it. It makes Lorosenko a little weak in the knees. Meanwhile, Almabayev, it looks like when you were 9 years old and I was at like PetSmart with you and you took like a Chihuahua bed and stuck it on your head for like a hat. Like, Adam, put that down or I'll have to buy it. Like that's that Almabayev has. It's just an anticlimactic hat.
Yeah,
it doesn't,
yeah, for
like,
sure.
He puts it on and it doesn't feel like he's punctuating a victory. It just looks like he's getting ready to go back out into the rain or something.
Yeah,
it's just a hat.
Yeah, both him and his hat look like the de-evolution of Shavkat Rakhmonov. Like the Pokemon like evolution into Shavkat, both in size and in the amazingness of the hat.
So his hat hasn't hit puberty yet, is what you're saying. It'll get like fur and fangs and everything. Yeah. JP Taylor, it totally looks like one of those like microfiber neck pillows that you wear on a plane. That is the perfect comparison for it.
That's it right there.
Yeah. Before that, and my goodness, was this the main card opener, the welterweight bout between Josh Quinlan and Adam Fugit? Okay, man, here's the perfect example of what I'm talking about with this card. This wasn't a bad fight. It's not like it was some shit show where they were both exhausted in 7 minutes. It wasn't like, it wasn't a low skill fight. It wasn't boring in the moment, but it felt like a women's flyweight fight where within a minute you're like, oh, this is going to go all 3 rounds. All 3 rounds are going to be individually difficult to score, and we're never even going to get within sniffing distance of a finish. Like you knew that's what you were getting. And yeah, they kind of went at it for 3 rounds. They used a lot of the same approach on each other. Just, lots of low kicks, basic 1-2s on the feet. Like Fugit tried stance switching tactically. Quinlan tried a couple Superman punches. None of the exotic stuff they tried was really effective at all. So it just really boiled down to, I can't believe I'm saying a phrase that Dominic Cruz, I think, said 15 times tonight, but it was kind of like a mirror match. Just two middling welterweights in a decent, evenly matched kickboxing match for 3 rounds. I mean, gotta take on this one. What'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, not only was the fight exactly how you said it was, just kind of middling, just back and forth at kicking range. I also took this fight as like half like pizza break. And so I was like watching this kind of like at the corner of my eye. And that mixed with just how the fight went, like you said, made it very hard to score. I mean, my notes on the 3rd round just say Quinlan lands some good shots. Fugit hurts Quinlan's arms, lots of kicks. I don't know who won. That's all I said about the 3rd round, because that was probably my low point of the card, because not only did I eat, but also it was pretty boring. And yeah, because right before this was supposed to be Tagir versus Joshua Van. And I kind of mapped my night with like, okay, get to the halfway point, you get to Gear versus Van, get to the co-main event, you get, Ikram Aliskerov, and then you get the main event. But with losing both of those really like fucked with my night.
I mean, it messed with my night too. Like, for one thing, Ulanbekov versus Van was arguably the best fight on the card. Like, not the highest stakes fight. That was the main event, but that was the best fight on the card. The one I looked forward to the most. Josh Van being a Houston guy, I was, always excited to see my local guys do their thing. Yeah, losing that sucked. Before that, we had the prelims, and for once in a million years, the prelims were shorter than the main card for a UFC card. Yeah. In the top prelim, Jimmy Flick versus Nate Maness. I will occasionally talk about how I want to understand the fights. Like, my goal is to understand what's going on, and being able to predict fight outcomes is interesting to me only in that, well, I have to get a certain number of them right in order for people to like take me seriously as an analyst. But here's one where I got the result right. The guy won that I thought was going to win. It wasn't a real stretch. He was a 5-1 favorite, but everything else about the fight, I pretty much got wrong. So, if you're just somebody that, is tracking handicappers on a spreadsheet, I look great, but I'm like, dude, I got this fight dead wrong. This is the fight that I was most sure was not going to make it out of the first round one way or the other. I was like, you know what? Either Jimmy Flick is going to land a spectacular submission and tap a man out, or he's going to pull guard trying, and Maness is just going to beat his brains out. And instead, we got a 3-round fight, and Flick's striking actually looked pretty good. The scouting report on Flick coming into this fight was he's an incredibly creative submission guy, but his striking is a huge liability. And more importantly, his wrestling is bad enough that he can only get into position to do submissions either by pulling guard or by hoping his opponent makes a mistake. But no, he tagged Maness a few times. He wasn't really deterred by Maness's power. He got the fight to the mat once or twice without doing sacrifice throws or Imanari rolls. It may not be enough to save his job. More on that afterwards, but Jimmy Flick arguably looked as good tonight as he has in the UFC. Like, yeah, he looked fantastic flying, triangling Cody Durden in like 40 seconds, but that wasn't repeatable in terms of skills that could propel him to victory against multiple UFC flyweights. He showed a few of them tonight. I mean, it still wasn't a great fight. My main takeaway from this is that Nate Maness is huge for flyweight. Like, he's not obviously he's not massive. As tall as Jose Johnson, but he's got that frame. Like, he's almost as tall as Jose Johnson, but then he's got like muscle on his frame like Kai Kara France. He is a big dude.
Yeah.
Did you come away from this feeling especially good or bad about either guy?
I mean, kind of. I mean, yeah, like you said, I pictured Maness being a lot more down at this. I mean, he was billed as like what was he billed at, like a 550 favorite or something like that?
Minus 450. It might have widened out like after the weigh-ins, after they faced off, and Maness looked like a suit of armor that Flick could put on. But yeah, it was like minus 450 in the middle of fight week.
Yeah, well, he didn't win like one, which doesn't say a lot because Vegas can always put out shit like that, but still, like, Maness won, was more competitive than the odds would suggest. So, and I mean, Flick, was more competitive than you would think. So, yeah, didn't really go high or low for much of these other guys, but ooh,
dude, Marcus Mustard saving the day again. See, unless I know otherwise, I just do the math because the UFC typically signs people to 4-fight deals. This was Flick's, this was Flick's 5th fight in the UFC. So yeah, it would have made sense that he just signed a new deal. They're not going to cut him off of this performance in the first fight of a new deal. So yeah, he should probably be safe from the UFC. And even if this wasn't his 5th fight in the UFC, that weird faux retirement that he did might have gotten him a new deal inked anyway. So yeah. Dev just throwing daggers out there, does his grocery shopping at Dollar General. So he's eating like the off-brand Cheetos and like the cans of soda that have like a price sticker on the side. Yeah, like that's That's amazing. Eating a lot of like nerds ropes.
Yeah, his
All right.
nutritionist is like the cashier. He's just like, do you think this would, oh man. Oh man.
Before that, women's flyweights, Carly Judice and Gabriela Fernandez. Considering that Fernandez's problem in her first 2 UFC fights, as well as, or yeah, in her first 2 UFC fights, was that she got taken down and just absolutely molested on the ground. This seemed like a solid matchup for her in that Judice is a fellow kickboxer who was
Mhm.
probably going to oblige her with a fight on the feet. I still picked Judice in this fight because I figured that she would have the common sense to watch the tape on Fernandez and take advantage of the obvious problems in her takedown defense and ground game. She really didn't. I mean, she tried for a takedown like once in the fight, but she almost won this thing anyway.
Yeah.
It was very much volume versus power. Just Judice was a
Yeah.
little taller, a little rangier, and accentuated those advantages by throwing straight punches and straight kicks and just threw better volume, where Fernandez kind of was this muscled up tank who marched forward throwing winging shots. And it was very even, between the two approaches
Mhm.
for most of the
Mhm.
fight. It was interesting. Fernandez looked tired by midway through the first round, like literally 3 minutes in. I was like, is she gassing out already? But
Yeah, I saw
I
that.
don't know if they gave her smelling salts on the stool between rounds, but she came out for the first minute of the second and third round looking pretty fresh and got off to a good start and kind of put Judice on the back foot. And even if she again, got tired pretty quickly, just kind of like a a reheated sandwich that you microwave and it's like nice again for like 30 seconds. Uh, it was enough. And I think it helped that she did visible, appreciable damage on Judice.
Yeah.
I mean, the judges are supposed to take that into account, but, uh, you know, Judice, for somebody who's from Louisiana, has a terrible tan. Like, are we sure she's not from like Wales or Scotland? Uh,
Wow. Wow, yeah.
and so when Fernandez busted her up, her face was red immediately. Her nose was red. When she bled, I mean, it looked dramatic.
Yeah.
I'm not super high on either of these women, but again, it's women's flyweight, which is a wide open division right now.
Yeah.
I still think this is just too early for Judice. She's
Yeah.
25 years old. She had 4 pro fights. That's an acceptable signing when it's Alex Pereira and you are off the charts good at something else, or your Bo Nickel or your Brock Lesnar, where okay, I understand why they signed a fighter with
Mhm.
fewer than 5 pro fights, but Judice was I mean,
Her
there's a
first
bit of buzz. There was a bit of buzz in the Gulf Coast area around here about her, but like she's a decent prospect, you know, like that was it. I it's still a mystifying signing. And I mean, I'm glad she's there. Like by all means cash those checks, but I didn't see anything tonight that made me feel otherwise about her. Did you feel I mean,
Yeah.
do you feel strongly about either of these?
I mean, I see it pretty much the same way. It kinda reminded me of, and this was like we talked about earlier, this was kind of a trend throughout the night, but, there was a lot of moments where the faster fighter, maybe the more precise fighter just couldn't get off due to the power, due to the, toughness of their opponent. This mirrored the Kwamba Almeida fight a little bit, just in the fact that Judice was landing well in a lot of these exchanges as Fernandez is moving forward, but she is just walking through Judice's punches to get in close, brawl it up a little bit, and rinse and repeat. I mean, Judice outlanded her like by a pretty significant margin. At least when I checked the scores right before the fight ended. But still, Fernandez definitely, like you said, like put on the more damage. Judice didn't wear the damage well either. And yeah, I think Judice, like you said, her first pro fight was 2 years ago. This is her, what is it? Would it be sixth fight, sixth professional
Mhm.
MMA fight. She's young. I think she's like 25,
Yeah,
and
she's 25.
yeah, I think she's may have some room to go. I mean, I saw some things out there that I kind of like, and in a division like women's 125, I think there's a, or 115, sorry. There's places to go with that.
No, this was 125. And
Oh,
I
okay.
will say this, she's undergone a physical transformation. Like if you look at her 2 years ago, I mean, she made the same physical transformation in like 2 years that took Roxanne Modafferi like 15 years. Like she was just kind of thin and willowy 2 years ago and looked like that she could probably cut to a skinny 115. Now, like she's kind of ripped, but I mean, like she's on her way to something physically. Like I
Mhm.
said, maybe it's just because she's like a blonde chick, but it's like she has the capacity to maybe put Mononfiore type bulk on her and actually have, and power would come along with that to a certain
Mhm.
extent because she does have pretty good technique. But yeah, as of right now, she's still very much a work in progress.
Yeah.
This being the division it is, she might get the time to make those adjustments or not under the brightest lights. We'll see.
Yeah.
Uh, Before that, the most surprising outcome of the night, at least if the bettors and the bookmakers are to be believed, Weston Wilson picked up his first UFC win.
What
Uh,
a guy.
I I was dead wrong about this. A lot of people were dead wrong about this one.
Right. I was
Jekasaragi
dead
is not that good a fighter, and he was like a almost 4-1 favorite. Uh, I feel bad for Bisping. Like Bisping had a terrible night tonight. Maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit. But considering that I get picks wrong all the time, and I have a week to think about them, and then I have another week to let them marinate and like see how they play out. I can't imagine having to make calls like in real time. So just as Michael Bisping is saying, Sargi, he's fighting Weston Wilson. He's a karate type striker. Sargi has to charge forward as soon as he can and take this man down, take him down at all costs. And he takes him down and just promptly gets a triangle armbar. It could not have backfired any worse. And this at least was one miserable call that was
Yeah.
just not Bisping's fault. Wilson, yeah, he is a disciple of Stephen Thompson's dad, really, who has been, Stephen's coach forever.
Mhm.
And yeah, he stands and presents like a karate fighter, just lacking the athleticism that it takes to make that approach work in the UFC. But it turns out those long legs are good for something else. And Saragi did himself no favors because I'm trying to think of when slamming out of a fully locked in triangle or armbar has ever
Right.
worked in the UFC. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure it has once or twice, but far more often it just tightens up the hold.
Mhm. Yeah, it just reshuffles things, lets them get in a tighter thing, and yeah, he ran right into that, and I think Saragi probably bought into maybe the same Kool-Aid we were drinking leading up to this, that, yeah, Wilson, like, he's been chinned, in the UFC, what, twice now? I'm not 100% positive, but, yeah, and he just falls right into, whatever the choke was. I think it was, what was a triangle?
It started as an armbar and then he shifted over,
Right.
made it a triangle armbar. Yeah. Like
Gotcha.
after the slam, he
Gotcha.
switched over, made it a triangle armbar.
Yeah, and it reminded me a lot of, what happened in the Heastan Armfield fight, where a lot of times those guys are trying to get out of their, chokes by just, like, slamming the other guy to the ground, and so I see that, and I'm expecting that to sink it in tighter, which, didn't exactly work out there, but there's a lot of parallels in this card. A lot of, like, pairs of fights that, like, went somewhat similar ways with similar styles, but, yeah, Sergey, I mean, you could tell how how he was pissed off at himself when he lost that, which, he probably should be, but probably, saved, Wilson his job.
Good man, Devin Tejada mentioning the one time I think of that trying to slam your way out of a hold does work. And as Ricardo Arona will be happy to point out to you if you catch him on the beach down there in Rio, it only worked because Rampage totally inadvertently headbutted him right on the chin when he slammed him. Like he didn't mean to, but the
Really?
way he slammed him down, the crown of Rampage's head went right into his chin. That's
Wow.
why he knocked him the hell out.
Wow.
Yeah, bad night for Yekasaragi. In the UFC 145-pound division, almost nobody's going to make it to the top 10. It's just too hard. And you absolutely cannot afford to lose a fight where you're this big a favorite.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I even texted you this during the, like, right after the fight, but, like, he let his sort of mohawk mullet grow out to, like, kinda look like Diego Lopez's, and it did not give him, and I think he did that hoping it would give him, like, some better advantage on the ground. It did nothing for him. He got
no,
absolutely blasted.
yep, that's pretty much it. Uh, Before that, second fight of the night, Melquizael Costa versus Shayilan Nurdembeka.
Mm.
You know, I and if Keith was here, I would apologize. Well, I wouldn't apologize, but I would own up directly to him because I've been harsher on Costa's skill set than Keith has. like I said going into this, it feels like Costa is good at winging huge punches, and if that doesn't work, he just doesn't seem to have much else. He either gets knocked out or he gasses out, and they just either outpoint him or take advantage of him on the ground. But Costa showed the full skill set here because he was taking on a guy in Shai Yilan that, even though he was visibly smaller, kind of muscled Costa and threw him all over the place for the first half of the fight. But Shai Yilan, I mean, he never fully gassed out, but he got a little tired. He slowed down. Costa kind of pieced him up on the feet without overswinging on stuff. He clearly was conscious of fighting a guy that wanted to take him down and just didn't leave himself open by overswinging too badly. And then on the ground, obviously, he showed great poise, and he got what they tried to say was a rear naked choke, but was absolutely not a rear naked choke. That
Oh,
was a
dude,
face crank.
that was right on Shai Yilan's teeth, and I could feel it through the screen because you've talked
And,
about how like face cranks just feel
dude,
miserable.
imagine somebody putting their forearm across the middle of your face and squeezing your head as hard as they
Well,
can.
it reminds me of like getting into fights with my older brother, where since he's 3 years older than me, he would just like get me on my back and just press his forearm into my face, and it seems miserable. And yeah, it was definitely like above the jaw, and
Could
yeah.
you kick Mike's ass now?
100%, 100%. That guy
Okay, cool.
is 100%.
Okay, so
But that's
like
completely besides the point.
I need to see Duffy versus Duffy. Like you and Mike can have it out. Any
We'll
other
get the
thoughts on Costa versus Shai Yilan? I mean, I'm blowing through these just because, again, this card has like outside of the top fight, like had like 0 top 15 fighters on it. Hell, it might have 0 top 25 fighters on it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's barely worth asking what's next for this guy. Well, what's next? It should be another fighter that's unranked coming off a win. That they haven't
Mhm.
fought before. That's
Right.
always the answer.
Right. Right. And yeah, and another thing to that is that since I'm in the chair and it's such a bad card, you always talk about how Keith's a lot more like the X's and O guy, and you talk more about trajectory of the fight, things like that. I am to you what you are to Keith. I'm new to this. I'm very vibes based, I guess I should say. And so yeah, not a whole lot to talk about. I will say I wrote this down. Costa, good win from him, but he does look like my like custom Dark Souls 3 character that I made when I was like 14 years old. Just like especially with the hair and just like you can change all the colors and then yeah. But besides that, nothing else to say.
He is bucking the trend because I'm old enough as an appreciator of the sport that I remember the days where the fighter who came out with neon colored hair was going to get his ass kicked.
Yeah.
Like it was a pretty reliable predictor. Like being announced as a freestyle fighter or coming out with neon colored hair was pretty much guaranteed that you're going to get your ass kicked. Before that, the opener, oddly, you had an undefeated fighter in the opener, Josephine Knudsen against the debuting Julia Pilastri. Interesting fight. I mean, I still don't think Knudsen is the truth at 115. There are some undefeated fighters that are the goods. And then there are some undefeated fighters that, well, as Matt Hughes once said, if you're undefeated in this sport, you just haven't run into the right guy yet. Yeah. Or if you're Khabib, you retired before running into the right guy. Like Knudsen, she's a lot of fun. She's not a bad fighter. At strawweight, I mean, she may be on the cusp of the rankings if she can get another win or two in a row. But she has holes in her game because Julia Pilastri, who's not that hot a prospect, exploited her takedown defense pretty badly.
Yeah.
Pilastri chose to test her luck on the feet against a decorated kickboxer, and she got the worst of it, but she didn't get knocked silly. This is 115. Almost nobody has one-shot power. So Pilastri had the luxury of seeing how she'd do against a very good kickboxer.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't like what she was getting, and she was able to take Knudsen down pretty easily. And the problem is that, if I'll go X's and O's for a minute, especially in the women's divisions where very, very few women have amateur backgrounds in wrestling, most fighters on offense don't know what to do after the first takedown attack or after the first entry succeeds or fails. Like you've changed levels, you've gotten in, you've got a double or you've got a single. The other fighter's trying to sprawl, like they're trying to get their hips back, they're trying to get you up and off them. What do you do next? There are things that the attacking fighter should do next. Like if you're on a double, turn to a single, and try to go around the side. Try to run the pipe. If you're the defending fighter, get double underhooks, try to lift their body up. If it's a single, get your one leg out and try to turn away from that side, or get a whizzer and turn away on that. And if you're a fighter who's wrestled through high school or even before that, it's instinctive. You've done it thousands of times. Knudsen doesn't know what to do after the first attempt, so she sprawled properly, and then Pilastre just kept trying and eventually dumped her over anyway. Then she went to work from top position. Honestly, I thought Pilastre lost, and all three of the judges scored it 29-28 for Knudsen, but I thought Pilastre looked pretty good. She may not be undefeated, but I think she's just as likely to become a contender as Knudsen is. Were you impressed by either of these women?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those interesting things where, especially when I sit down to watch the fights a lot more closely than I usually would on a night like this, where I'm going to be recapping them with you. I sit down at my desk, I have all my shit set up, and I turn on the first fight, and it's Keith makes this analogy a lot of, cards like this just being like school cafeteria pizza. It's not good pizza, but pizza's pizza. And it's something about like the first fight of the night, regardless of whichever card I'm recapping with you, that like for some reason like gets me like amped up, because that first bite, when you like haven't watched a fight that day, it's like, oh, this is entertaining, this is great. And it was entertaining. I mean, especially in what was coming out of Knudsen. But I feel pretty much the same about both these fighters. I think they both have parts of their game that could compete at a high level. I do think Knudsen's striking looks just as good as some of those people, in the rankings. I mean, it's definitely better than like a God, what's her name? Brazilian, attractive, top 10, 115.
What, the that fought on this card?
No, sorry. The like in the actual top 10. What is her name? She fought Jessica Andrade and got her ass kicked. How could I not think of her name?
I mean, are we talking about like Ariane Lipsky or somebody like a 125, or is it 115?
No, it's 115. 115. Flyweight. It might be in the chat because people might be doing it, but I'm sorry. I need to find this name. 1 second. It is. I can't believe I can't think of this. It is. I was thinking of Mackenzie Dern. I am completely Dern, out of my rocker right now. Completely out of my rocker right now. But so her striking does match up fairly well to some of these, more one-dimensional fighters, even in the top of the rankings. But in a division, especially like strawweight, where you have killers at the top, like of course the champion Zhang and Tatiana Suarez, and a whole bunch of other people, that does not fly. That's one of those things she's gonna have to work on. And same with her opponent Pilastre. Sorry if that is her name.
Yeah.
Pilastre. Same thing there. I mean, a little more rounded, I should say. Maybe not well-rounded, but a little more, even in all these categories. But I mean, we'll see where they go. I think Knudsen has slightly more upside, but I mean, definitely in a division like that, anyone can do stuff.
And worth mentioning that while I scored this fight for Knudsen, I gave her the first and third rounds. I gave Pilastre the second round. If we were scoring this by pride rules or one championship rules, like taken as a whole, I probably would have scored it for Pilastre, because the one round that she won, while it wasn't like 10-8 worthy, was much more decisive.
Yeah.
And like Knudsen landed two clearly, I mean, she landed one clearly illegal up kick and then almost landed another one that would have resulted in point deduction like 10 seconds after the other one. And if I'm scoring the fight as a whole, and I don't have to count numbers, I just have to say who I thought won the fight, I'm counting those against Knudsen. Yeah, scored as a whole, Pilastre probably got the better of the fight. But that's the drawback of round scoring and the 10-point must system. Yeah. There you have it. That's the 11 fight card of UFC on ESPN 58, UFC Vegas 93. Let's move on to the fun stuff. However fun it's going to be. Starting with the cut list. There is a cut list. There are 600 fighters on the UFC roster. There's 10 episodes of the Contender Series every year, and the UFC on average signs like 3 or 4 fighters an episode out of that. Somebody's got to make room for those 40 fighters, plus however many get signed directly out of regional organizations or out of the Ultimate Fighter, which is going on right now. So somebody's got to go. Adam Duffy, would you cut anybody that fought at UFC Vegas 93?
Besides the surgeon that's gonna have to go in on Perez's knee, I don't know if I'm gonna be doing any cutting. I mean, maybe one. What do you think?
I'm giving everybody a pass here. Timothy Kwamba's now 0-2 in the UFC, but again, he gets a complete pass on his first fight, fighting a huge dude on short notice. And here again, as a young guy who was kind of competitive, I'm not cutting him off of 2 losses. Jimmy Flick now 2-3 in the UFC, but again, even in a loss, he arguably looked better than he has. I'm letting all these people ride. And that's interesting because sometimes we have much better cards than this, where there are like 6 people on my cut list.
Yeah.
But
you're usually pretty brutal.
Most of them are so new that they haven't racked up enough losses to get cut. That's part of it. Like the usual bad UFC undercard has like 2 fighters that are both on 3-fight losing streaks against each other, and it's like a pink slip derby. So I'm fine if everybody makes the cut.
Yeah, you mentioned this in the preview, but this card is kind of filled to the brim with fighters that the company owns, that the company owes a favor to. Either they stepped out on short notice, they're just coming in for their debut or something like that. But that mixed with like the wins and the losses. I mean, honestly, if Wilson had gotten absolutely plunked by Sergey, that he might be on my list. Quinlan kind of, edged towards my list, but it was a competitive enough fight where I was okay with it. But yeah, just a combination of those factors means everyone gets to stay. And with that, I'm curious actually if they gave out any performance bonuses for this fight night.
Let's take a
look. I
look.
think somebody might have been worthwhile, but
bonuses. We have some. Let's see. We have a fight of the night and 2 performances of the night. So the UFC's usual array of bonus checks. Whom would you give them to? Like if you're watching right now, you probably already know who actually won them. You're either watching the press conference or you're following on Twitter or looking at the Sherdog front page. So instead of guessing, just say whom you'd give them to. I'll say, I mean, if you know, you can go. Otherwise,
I have mine.
Okay.
I don't know, but I would give one fight of the night, 2 performances, right?
Exactly.
Fight of the night has to go to Armfield. He stand has to, and performances I would give one of them to Wilson because I think he deserves that, and then I would give the second one to either Taira or Almabayev. Kind of tough with Taira, but they like to give it to the main event guy. I give it to Taira.
All right. I would give the fight of the night to Heastan versus Armfield. Yep. And I would give performances of the night to Heastan, so he'd be a double winner tonight in my books. And again to Weston Wilson. What the UFC actually did is give the fight of the night to Fernandez versus Judice.
No way.
And performances of the night to Tatsuro Taira and Brady Heastan. So okay, I'm a little blown away here because I thought that not only was Heastan versus Armfield the fight of the night, I thought it was kind of a no-brainer. I thought it was the only good fight of the night.
Yeah,
honestly.
exactly.
It's the
only fight that gave any excitement.
The only fight tonight that I will ever watch again for fun. Like I'll have to watch a lot of these again for tape study the next time these people fight because I'm gonna forget tonight as soon as I can. But yeah, that's the only one that I'll probably watch again for fun. And then giving a performance of the night to a win that came on a low percentage injury, it seems ghoulish for one thing.
Yeah, a little bit.
Like if anything, that like robbed us of entertainment. And then I always lean towards, I wish they gave more bonuses to fighters down the card where it's actually life-changing money. Yeah, like to Weston Wilson, or hell to Melky Costa, that would have been life-changing money. You know, to Taira, I mean,
he's maybe not rolling in it, but
he's not rolling in it. I mean, he's probably in like a 12-12 or maybe at the tops 20-20 deal himself. But if things play out like we think, he's probably going to fight 10 more times in the UFC and be in the six figures pretty soon.
Yeah.
Weston Wilson ain't. Like, so yeah, that's a little bit of a bummer. Oh, Slug saying bottle of Fireball. You better be talking to him because he's the one in his early 20s. I've well graduated from the point of drinking sugary mixers straight. And for one thing, anything once you've thrown it up once, you can never go back. I may have projectile vomited Fireball at some point in my life. So yeah. Anyway, it hurts worse coming out the nose than going in the mouth. Believe me. Bulls and Bears. Shall we move on to Bulls and Bears?
Let's do it.
All right.
Bulls and Bears.
You want to go Bulls or Bears first?
I need some joy in my life, so let's do Bulls first.
Bulls. These are things whose stock is up. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
You got it.
Okay.
Seniority wins.
Bulls. In order from lowest to highest, I'm going to throw Brady Hiestand out there. Like, Hiestand didn't need that much help. Like, he already had a little bit of buzz as a young guy who, came in second on Tough and, came in second in a great fight. Most of the problem since then is that he's only fought once a year. He'd been away for like 14 months coming into the Armfield fight, and he kind of made up for lost time. He reminded us why we were excited about him in the first place. He picked up a crucial win. He's now won 3 in a row since that Tough final. Stock up moment for Brady Hiestand. All I want out of this guy for the rest of the year is fight 2 more times in 2024. That's really all you need to do. Even if you lose one of them, it's better than just being on the shelf for another year. So yeah, stock up for him. Stock up. Melky Costa. He was either even money or he may have been a slight favorite in this fight, but he took the best that Shayilan could offer. He got a finish. He got a finish on the ground, which gives people like me that thought of him as a one-dimensional slugger something else to think about, to say nothing of the featherweight division having something else to think about. Good moment for Melky Costa. My number one bull of the night, Mr. Weston Wilson. I have made a complete dickhead out of myself by saying he's one of the UFC's worst and most mystifying signings of the last 5 years. That luckily the Shillen and Duffy preview doesn't do our lock of the night anymore, or I might have done something especially dumb, like call him my lock of the night to lose. He won. Regardless of how it turns out from here, nobody can ever take that away from him. He has a win in the UFC. He has a finish in the UFC. He looked fantastic. Congratulations, Weston Wilson, my number one bull of the night. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, list looks fairly similar to yours. I had Asu for my third bull. I mean, not exactly showing us any big step up in competition, but I do think that still cementing himself, especially on a card deep with flyweights. Just pushing himself ever so closer to maybe some sort of big jump up the rankings. I put Wilson in my number 2 spot. I was good for him. Got that done. Disappointed he didn't get any cash for that, but what can you do, I suppose. And then my final bull was Hiestand. I think that especially in a situation like this, where this is a fairly low stakes, low visibility card, it's watched a lot by the 50 people in the Apex and us too right here. People like Hiestand are the ones who can capitalize on those moments to really put themselves out there a little bit, because he was the one shining light of this entire card. The only thing that kind of made me like lift off my seat a little bit. And so for that, good for him. He also, you said, won a performance bonus, right? Hiestand?
Yes, he did.
Okay. Yeah. And I think he deserves that. I think, I think he saved the night a little bit for me. But yeah, those are my 3.
All right. Over to the other side. With the good must come the bad. Bears, do you want to things whose stock is down? You want to go first? You want me to go first?
I'll go first. Yeah, why not? Why not? I mean, it's tough to say because I do wish the best for him, but I did pencil in my third as Perez. I didn't want to put it
Huh.
too high. I mean, it's one of those things where God bless him. Hope that the injury works out well, but with his age, he was and the fact that he was on this sort of track back to some real interest in the division. To
Mhm.
have something like this happen to him is super unfortunate, but yeah. So he's my third bear. My second bear. I didn't exactly know what to put. I put Bisping because he was kind of pissing me off the whole night. Not just with like takes that were unfortunate and that he couldn't have exactly predicted, but for some reason, just his commentary grates at me. And I know a lot of people do this when they're watching the fights, but they'll turn, especially people in our position, but they'll turn off the commentary so it doesn't
Mhm.
influence their own decision making during the thing. I
Yeah.
can't do that because if I like sit in silence watching people fight, I feel weird. And so I have to have it on at least for something. And he was driving me crazy all night. And I'll say the number one bear tonight was the new UFC gloves. We've had them for 3 cards now. We've had 2 of those cards not have a single knockout. I think they're supposed to be lighter, which means people are supposed to hit harder, right? And so
Mhm.
I don't know what's happening. But weirdly enough, this has to be some
Well,
record. I'm sure Jay Petrie will come up with some sort of
well,
statistic for this.
Jay Petrie is going to be on vacation starting next week, but when he gets back, I'm going to hit him up about that. And I mean, I let me chime in on those because I agree on the gloves. Like they have not stopped eye pokes.
True.
They have added some notable eye and facial scrapes because of the seams.
Yeah.
And ahead of their debut, like Islam and Poirier were disagreeing about them, and Islam was like, "These gloves are stiff and they have like edges and seams. They're going to cause more cuts." And Poirier liked them, but turns out Islam was right. Like multiple people have thought they got poked in the eye, they got raked by the glove, and I mean that always did happen a little bit. It's happened more since then, and yeah, it's time to ask: are these robbing people of power? Are these like,
Yeah.
I mean, the old Shudo gloves, it was hard to knock people out, but it's because they were more like a boxing glove. They were big and padded.
Yeah.
These, yeah, being lighter theoretically, lighter glove equals more power is transferred to the body of the person who's struck. But 2 cards in, it's been a serious power outage. I
We'll
also
see.
agree with your take on Bisping. I would add the whole commentary team. I I hesitate to go too hard on them here because they're doing a job that I could not do. Like I couldn't do color commentary, let alone play by play without a lot of reps, and I still might not be good at it. It's hard to do that stuff in real time.
Yeah.
But tonight they seem to be phoning it in. Like it was a mediocre card to start with. It lost 2 bouts, and one of them was the best bout of the night, and the other one was at least pretty certain to be over in the first round.
Right.
And they were just like, I turn I'm one of the people that turns the commentary off just because I know I'm susceptible to suggestion. I turned it on briefly. I heard Gooden say Melquizael Costa's name twice in his first 3 tries, and I just turned it right back off.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Like,
That's crazy.
especially when you're an alternate for 2 of the more professional people in the game, especially
Yeah.
John Anik, who
Yeah.
just starts out by having every fighter say their name into his phone and then practicing it.
Yeah.
To say Melzikiel Costa twice, and then Bisping at the end of the fight, like calling Costa Nerdembeka Shayilan. I what did
It
everybody turn
it's
into Bruce
crazy.
Buffer?
It's crazy because you asked me to do this yesterday morning. Like you
Mhm.
asked me if I was doing anything. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll hop on. It's been a while. It's been fun. And I took that time to make sure I knew everyone's names, at least to the best of my ability, just from reading it off the page. And I'm doing this. I'm doing this to hang out with some random people online for an hour and a half. I'm not getting paid tens of thousands of dollars per night to do this. They're getting the names wrong. The first thing John Gooden said when the broadcast started, I thought this was hilarious, is he's standing next to Dominic Cruz and Michael Bisping, and he's like, gentlemen, we have some great cards over the past couple of weeks, and if you look at this one, and he pauses for a second, he says, well, if you look at it, there's no fight under, this so-and-so weight class, and it's just like, the whole time it was definitely grating on me. And I think one last point to this, before I'll give it back to you. But the UFC has been releasing a few of their fights, like no commentary versions, just like just fight sounds and stuff like that. I don't think they ever should have done that, because that's making everyone realize that they really wish they could just have a broadcast with no commentary. And I think some regions allow you to do that. At least from what I see on just like some YouTube comments and stuff like that. That could be totally wrong, but that sounds amazing.
I honestly, if that was available as an option, I would pay for it. Like, would love that, to be able to hear the fight sounds, even hear the ref, but not hear the commentary. Would love it. I don't like those line up closely enough with my Bears that I don't really see the need to add anything. The only thing I'd add is maybe Jekasargi. Again, wins at 145 are hard to come by when you drop the ball that badly in a fight where you were such a huge favorite. He's going to regret that one. That's going to cost him later on, because he's exactly the kind of guy that might split his next 2 or 3 fights, and that's the difference between getting a new contract and not. So
that one 45 seconds.
Overall letter grade for the card. I mean, let me just go right in and go first. In the 4 years or so that Keith and I have been doing the show, like I think we're coming up on 200, like 150, 200 events. I don't think I've ever given an F. I'm not giving an F tonight. If this were a card I paid money for, this is an F. But for a card that was free on Cable Plus, like it's a D.
Yeah.
It might even be a D-. This is about as bad as it gets. The stakes were incredibly low, and the one fight that had serious divisional stakes ended in an unsatisfactory manner. Like in a manner where we learned a little bit, but it didn't even really sort out the division in the way that a more decisive result would have. So D- for me. This was about as bad as they come.
Yep. I was going to say the same thing. It's the Duffy and Duffy show, double D, giving this one a D- as well. I mean, we lost 2 of the 3 best fights on the card, and in doing so, we lost over half the ranked fighters on this card. And it was just, I've done this 5 times now. I think this is, I can't remember the other ones too well. This might be the worst one I've been on. But
it is. It's the worst one you've been on.
I'm hoping though that this is my 5th UFC Apex card that I've covered. I think now I can graduate to live fight nights, and then after that, after 10 of those, I can graduate to pay-per-views.
It might not even be 10. Maybe we'll do like 5 like actual arena fight nights, and then move you up to pay-per-view. What we really need to do is get you on a preview. 100%. Last and most important question of the night. Who's your listener of the night? Like, considering that this was, again, such a dismal card, we've had a lively chat. I swear that these maniacs like discussing the bad cards as much as the good ones.
Yeah, I think they like it. I think they like shitting on it with us, which is fair. I mean, we all get to gather around the dumpster fire. But my listener of the night is going to go to someone kind of new around here. Is going to go to Slug. He made me laugh a few times with his fireball joke.
It's hilarious. I was literally saying Slug. Like, normally people who come in here like hot with a chip on their shoulder about money they lost on bets, it's not good reading, and a lot of them flame out and get themselves banned within the first 5 minutes. But Slug got it off his chest, then made some interesting contributions to the actual discussion. Thanks for joining us. Welcome back anytime. That is it from me. The recap for UFC on ESPN 58. I have been Ben. He has been the kid, Adam. Next up is UFC Riyadh, UFC on ABC 6. All of a sudden, it is now Whitaker versus Aliskerov. Had been Whitaker versus Shemaev. So look out for the preview for that one, up first thing Monday morning as usual. And then, of course, I believe Keith and I will be recapping that one. Keep in mind, that's an early card because it's happening in Saudi Arabia, so don't oversleep. But thanks for joining us. As always, we will see you again soon.
Yep. Thank you guys so much.